This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. But first, a quick run through the markets for you. So the bourses in Egypt, Kenya, Nigeria were not trading today. Ghana's bourse, however, has had one of the more aggressive jumps so far in the year. The composite index over there has gone up by over 600 points, roughly 33% or so, with a significant jump rather in the last fortnight. That's higher than the near 11% gains we've seen in the all share and the top 40 over at the JSE. Away from the continent, Coinbase released its Q1 results yesterday. Its shares closed 6.5% lower on Thursday, taking its market cap down to about $52.8 billion. But its shares were higher by at least 6% in pre-market trading in the wake of those Q1 results. The number of users making monthly transactions up by 117% quarter-on-quarter to over 6 million. Net income up over 330% to $771 million for the quarter. Clearly, the crypto business is quite the money printer. Here's what's coming up tonight. There's a turning point for Tanzania's gold as exports of the precious metal hit a historic level. South Africa's property market remains robust despite the damage inflicted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And the US real estate market is also witnessing one of its largest booms in a decade. That and more is in the pipeline for you tonight. But our starting point is right here in East Africa. Tanzania's gold exports have hit the $3 billion a year mark for the first time. Spot gold prices have fallen by about 3.2% so far in the year. But remember, in 2020, they went up by at least a quarter as the coronavirus pandemic swept across the globe. Daniel Kijo starts us off tonight with a perspective from Dar es Salaam.
Tanzania's gold exports have reached a record high. According to the Bank of Tanzania, the value of exports of gold rose to $3 billion by March this year, compared with $2.3 billion in the previous 12 months. Jared Mturi from Tanzania's Chamber of Mines says investors flock to gold, considering it a safe investment during a crisis.
Prices in the stock markets were going down, prices for other investments. So gold prices started to go up from the low of around $1,300 to, there was a time it peaked above $2,000 per ounce.
In 2017, Tanzania passed a number of sweeping changes to its mining laws. The measures included the enactment of the new mining law of 2017, establishing 31 big mineral markets and 39 small ones at the district level. There's also been a bid to control smuggling.
We have continued to work with security organs to ensure security and strategic inspection of the gold sales in different regions. We enforce the management and transportation of minerals in all border stations, airports and ports.
It's expected to be some time before the impacts of the pandemic have reduced enough to remove all travel restrictions. Experts say this offers an opportunity to grow the sector even further.
This is an opportunity for the country to push for new mines to come online. Investors who are waiting for their mining licenses, I think the government should issue them as soon as possible so that they construct new mines and we get production from the mines and take advantage of the increased prices.
Since 2020, gold exports have overtaken tourism, which was hit hard by COVID-19. Mining's contribution to Tanzania's GDP has grown from 3.8% to 6.4%. Now, President Hassan's government says it wants to increase the number of investors in the sector to grow it even further. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Up north, the IMF is set to complete Egypt's second and final review of its year-long $5.2 billion loan program at the end of June. A positive review will unlock the final tranche of that facility worth $1.6 billion. Egypt received an initial disbursement of $2 billion last June and an additional $1.6 billion amount late last year. CGTN's Yasser Kim has the details from Cairo.
The $5.2 billion loan is meant to fund the government's emergency financial packages and counter the prolonging effects of the coronavirus pandemic.
Like any economy worldwide, Egypt's been affected by the fallout of the coronavirus pandemic. The hardest hit sectors were tourism and aviation. The Suez Canal succeeded in maintaining the pre-COVID profit margins, but tourism is the major source of hard currency for the state. The halt in flights and tourist inflows strongly reduced the state's revenue. This loan helps cover the deficit and ensures funding continues for important social welfare programs, healthcare sector and development projects.
In its previous review, end of 2020, the IMF had raised its expectations of Egypt's economic growth from 2% to 2.8%. It has also praised the economy as flexible and able to resist external shocks. The current review is underway till June.
The World Bank doesn't provide any loans unless there's a study of the economic situation. Credit history shows Egypt has succeeded in repaying its loans and interests on time in spite of the coronavirus crisis. There are also positive outlooks from international ratings agencies towards the economy. Egypt's achieved its lowest inflation rates in 20 years, a drop in interest rates, and a drop in unemployment rates and a rise in growth rates in spite of the coronavirus. These numbers show the economy is strong enough to fulfill its debt payments.
Egypt has been one of a handful of countries that avoided economic contraction amid the pandemic year 2020. And experts say a positive IMF report would support the economy going forward. The release of the final tranche of the IMF loan is not just about receiving money, but it's a sign of approval for foreign investments to return to the North African country. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
All right, then, into the world of debt. Back in October 2018, that's the genesis of our story here, the Seychelles government issued what would be the world's first sovereign blue bond. It's a debt instrument designed to raise funds needed to invest in developing sustainable marine and fisheries assets. Now, that particular bond raised about $15 million from a range of international investors. Proceeds from the bond have since then funded the expansion of marine protected areas, improved the governance of priority fisheries, and the development of the Seychelles blue economy. Marine resources are absolutely critical to the island nation's economic growth. After tourism, in fact, fisheries is the country's most important sector. Contributes significantly to annual GDP. It employs roughly 17% of the population. Fish products make about 95% of the total value of domestic exports. All right, then, so let's explore how this program did work and the achievements it has achieved, the results rather it's developed ever since then. Jean-Paul Adam is the director of the Tech, Climate Change and National Resource Management Division at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Before that, he was the Seychelles Foreign Minister. He joins us live on the program tonight. Thank you very much for your time this evening, sir. So walk us through this debt for nature services swap that worked in the Seychelles case. How was it structured and what results has it delivered so far?
Thank you, and good evening, Ramah. It's a pleasure to join you. Unfortunately, I hear you a little bit distantly. I think I gathered your question, but essentially the structure of this debt swap was aimed primarily at recognizing that a country like Seychelles, very vulnerable to climate change, but also at that time being a middle-income country, like actually the majority of African countries now actually middle income, and therefore having less access to concessional resources. So the main aim of the debt swap was a means to raise additional finance to invest in resilience to climate change, and on terms which also would be more affordable, because the cost of financing for African countries in general can be quite prohibitive. So this was an innovative means to raise money from existing debt, which could then be reinvested in building climate resilience. And the format was a debt buyback. In this case, a partnership with the Nature Conservancy, whereby they facilitated using their own funds the buyback of the existing debt. This debt was then transferred into a trust fund specially created, And the Seychelles government then, rather than repaying its Paris Club creditors as before, would pay to this trust fund. And the advantages were in terms of a lower interest because the maturity of the loans were extended from 8 years to 13 years at a lower interest rate, also because the Nature Conservancy agreed to have a lower rate of interest. And the payments would also be in local currency. And the interest payments in particular were set aside for the purposes of investing in nature conservation. So that's a very brief overview on how the deal was structured.
Okay, so that's the debt for nature swap, but the blue bond also raised another $15 million. But do you think it would have been the success it was if there wasn't a credit risk guarantee from the World Bank?
Yes, the blue bond followed on from the debt for nature swap, and apologies because I didn't quite hear your intro before. So apologies if I didn't quite answer that question directly. But the blue bond became possible because we showed what was possible through the debt for nature swap, and that attracted the interest as well of impact investors. But certainly the blue bond would not have been possible without the partial guarantee of the World Bank, and also the blending of resources with the Global Environment Facility, which meant that the average interest rate of the bond for Seychelles went below 3%, which then made it affordable. Countries such as Seychelles at that time, borrowing on the international market, would have been paying well over 6% or even 7%. So this represented a substantial benefit in terms of the cost of that financing, recognizing as well that it would be invested in climate resilience and the sustainable reform of the fisheries sector, and more broadly in terms of ocean-based climate resilience. The challenge for African countries and many other African countries is this high cost of borrowing through bonds on capital markets, particularly when you look at the current situation in relation to COVID, where countries, if they have to borrow, often have to pay very high costs. And this is something which is affecting the finance also flowing into areas such as conservation, biodiversity, and climate resilience.
The economy of the Seychelles, of course, is heavily reliant on tourism. But with this pandemic drastically cutting spending on tourism and travel, how has that affected the government's ability to continue implementing these blue bond funded conservation programs?
Well, I think like many countries in Africa, tourism represents a big part of GDP. Seychelles probably has the highest contribution of tourism to its GDP, almost 40%. But if you look at the knock-on factors as well, other areas which are not considered as tourism classically, but would not exist in a country like Seychelles without tourism, then of course it's even higher. So the COVID-19 in particular has dramatically hit the tourism in the country, although after a successful vaccination campaign, the country is reopening now. The government the government has generally maintained its commitments towards paying these bonds for the reason because the ultimate benefit of the tourism sector is linked to the natural resources in Seychelles. So bonds such as this blue bond are contributing directly through the resources that were raised to maintaining the pristine environment, which is the key selling point in terms of the tourism sector. And of course, the cost as well of borrowing was dramatically lower because of the partial guarantee that was given by the World Bank. So it's generally something that the government would make a huge effort to make sure that they're maintaining their ability to repay. And more broadly, I think the economy is recovering more recently. So there is hope that the future will look good in terms of the capacity to repay, and even looking at opportunities going forward for further refinancing on capital markets.
Indeed. One last question for you, sir. Given what's been learned in this program, can this be implemented in other countries on the continent? Because you look across Africa, there are a lot of natural assets, but also you have relatively high debt loads that in some cases do need to be restructured.
Absolutely. And my current work in the Economic Commission for Africa is very much around advising countries on the opportunities that exist. For example, restructuring their existing debt. This can be done with partners that are actively looking to address the issue of the climate risk in their existing finance. So there is opportunity for refinancing of debt that may have been taken many years ago, and repurposing it, and in terms of the restructuring, reinvesting savings into sectors that build climate resilience. This therefore also sometimes creates the additional space to be able to take on new debt or have new issuances. And there is a huge growth in demand for green bonds or blue bonds on international markets. Africa has actually seen a growth in these bonds as well, but particularly led by the private sector. Sovereign bonds in Africa still remain a very small, sovereign green bonds in Africa remain a very small part of the global market at less than 1% of the total green bond issuances. But there are huge opportunities in this sector. Looking at the nature-based solutions that are being developed in Africa, you've got the Congo Basin, which sequesters 3 years worth of carbon emissions just in that basin. You've also got the opportunity around various countries that are very rich seagrass beds in their ocean, that have mangroves along their coastlines, and the opportunity to use this as part of a nature-based solution, investing to build climate resilience, but also do this in the context of sustainable finance and raise additional bond financing from international markets.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you very much for your time. Jean-Paul Adam, Director of the Tech, Climate Change and National Resources Management Division at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Time now for on to some company news. All right, then, let's start the segment in aviation. South African Airways says it plans to resume flying in July or in August, though this is entirely dependent on both pandemic trends and when it can resolve its dispute with its striking pilot. SA ceased flying in March 2020 after the pandemic basically shut down passenger air travel around the world. The airline has since then emerged from business rescue in April this year after 16 months during which the company was restructured. That entire process cost $16.4 million. About a third of that cash went into the business rescue practitioners. The remainder went to a range of other consultants, lawyers included. Sasol has agreed to sell a 30% stake in a natural gas line running from Mozambique to South Africa for as much as $361 million. It'll use the proceeds to pay down its debt. The deal rounds out an accelerated asset sale program that helped Sasol to slash its debt load, which had ballooned amid cost overruns at a giant U.S. chemicals project and the calling off of a proposed $2 billion share sale. Sasol will sell part of its stake in the Rompco pipeline to a group of buyers that includes a unit of South African financial services company Old Mutual. The fuel and chemicals maker will retain a 20% stake in the pipeline, though, and it will continue to operate and maintain that 865-kilometer link. Steinhoff International, which is still battling to recover from the accounting scandal that cost investors billions, says it will raise close to $1.1 billion when it lists its discount retailer Pepco in Warsaw later this month. The firm will sell roughly 102.3 million shares in the IPO, priced at about $10.69 each. That listing should reduce its stake from 78.9% rather, from around 98%. And finally, the online booking platform Airbnb is predicting a travel rebound unlike anything we've seen before after looking at a big jump in holiday bookings. In the first 3 months of 2021, US bookings beat pre-pandemic levels, with management saying they are seeing a steady improvement in business in the UK and France as well. Demand for breaks has risen as some countries emerge from pandemic restrictions. Booking values are up 52% to $10.3 billion as customers snapped up long-term stays and rural properties. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up. Sudan secures a bridging loan to help it clear arrears with the African Development Bank. And Nigeria's inflation is forecast to rise even further due to a combination of insecurity and dollar scarcity.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. Growth in South Africa's real estate market remains relatively robust despite the damage inflicted on household earnings and employment by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, there's been plenty of activity in the lower and the middle income segments, and sales in the high end of the market are also now gaining momentum. As CGTN's Julie Shah now reports, record low interest rates and falling property prices among the biggest drivers of this renewed activity.
Matt Brink was considering upgrading from an apartment to a home for a while. When South Africa's economy slowed during the hard lockdown a year ago, property prices dipped and the decision became simpler for Brink.
I've always wanted a house, so the house was always going to be the plan. COVID just made it that much easier on my wallet and in my life. It just brought me to my goal a lot sooner. As for having a house to live in, I certainly enjoy living in an actual house with a garden, a lot more space to enjoy if I'm going to be locked down in my place, if I can't go anywhere.
Brink had to compromise, however, on selling his old property.
It was a bit of a mixed bag because as much as I saw this great opportunity to buy something now that was not affordable and now is affordable, the place that I was selling wasn't exactly making a huge amount of profit that you would have expected. I mean, I still made a bit of profit. It just felt like I'd evened out, I'd made even on it, and I could move all that bond economy of our family into a house instead of a smaller space.
South Africa's house prices have dropped by around 15% over the last year. Historically low interest rates have also made the cost of debt more affordable for low and middle income earners like Brink.
So it's more a case of sellers becoming more realistic, and suddenly there is a flood of buyers that are looking to buy value purchases. So whereas we had very few buyers before, we're now sitting in a situation where there are lots of buyers, but they're still searching for good value.
A third wave and the upcoming winter months may dent momentum, but the short-term outlook still remains favorable for buyers.
We've got a couple of months, I think, still on the downside in terms of actual prices, but I think that going into the new year, I'm quite positive that people will start buying more property. Of course, the third wave is the biggest factor that we are potentially faced with.
With no end in sight yet to South Africa's lockdown, real estate agents expect activity to be sustained over the next 12 months. There's also been a pickup in the high-end market, but that's only really likely to take off when most South Africans are vaccinated and the economy can fully be reopened. Julie Shire, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Well, still in South Africa, the country's mining output went up by 21.3% year-on-year in March. That's the largest year-on-year rise in 6 years. Mineral sales for the month hit a record level, $5.3 billion. 41% of that, however, came from the platinum group metals. The March data was the first positive set since February last year. The February 2021 number was revised into negative territory. Now, last March, mining output declined by 14.9% year-on-year as mines cut production and sent workers home ahead of the start of a hard lockdown later that month. Now, the base effects notwithstanding, the latest data is being seen in a rather positive light. This was the biggest annual increase since March 2015, when an annual increase of 21.8% was recorded. Sudan, in the meantime, has cleared arrears due to the African Development Bank through a $413 million bridge loan that's been provided by 3 countries, the UK, Sweden and Ireland. The move now makes the country eligible for fresh credit from the Cote d'Ivoire-based lender. That includes an immediate grant of $207 million. Back in March, Sudan also cleared arrears due to the International Development Association, thereby enabling its full re-engagement with the World Bank after nearly 3 decades and paving the way for the country to get access to nearly $2 billion in grants for poverty reduction and economic recovery programs. On to the continent's largest economy. Inflation in Nigeria has hit the highest level in more than 4 years in March at 18.17%. And analysts expect it to rise even further in April on the back of prolonged insecurity in parts of the country and a continuing scarcity of US dollars. Analysts polled by the local publication Business Day say that consumer prices are expected to go up to 18.7% year on year as the cost of living continues to rise in Africa's most populous nation. Food inflation has accelerated to the highest pace in 15 years, and that's partly because of a worsening conflict between farmers and herders in Nigeria's agriculture belt that the government so far has struggled and failed to end. The situation is exacerbated by import restrictions that have been put in place by the country's central bank as part of its broader efforts to conserve its foreign currency reserves. To the Horn of Africa now. Ethiopia's sole mobile operator, Ethio Telecom, has launched a mobile phone-based financial service earlier this week. Mobile financial services are now becoming an increasingly larger part of African telecom operators' businesses after Kenya's Safaricom pioneered them with the rollout of M-Pesa back in 2007. And that effectively gave tens of millions of people, 30 million in Kenya's case, an alternative savings, payment and transaction channel compared to banks and good old cash. State-owned Ethio Telecom says it will allow users to send and receive money, deposit or take out cash at appointed agents, pay bills and to various merchants, and even receive cash sent from abroad. The new service is called Telebir. It marks quite a shift for Ethiopia. The banking system of 19 or so commercial banks serves a population of some 115 million people.
Using my mobile phone, I can do just about anything. I can pay my electricity bill, my water bill. I can receive and send money with it. This is just a huge deal for Ethiopia.
You know, with this new mobile money technology, we can significantly avoid going to banks and crowded places. That also helps to protect ourselves from the current COVID-19 pandemic. Apart from that, this new system saves time. Generally, this mobile money technology is key.
The benefit of this new Ethio Telecom system is multi-faced. You know, first of all, the coming out, the long-serving Ethio Telecom with new technology is something great. So instead of carrying a lot of cash now, one can use Telebir. The benefits are many. Therefore, if people use it, they can profit a lot and lose nothing.
The World Bank has agreed to lend $500 million to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Proceeds of that loan will be used to improve roads, prevent erosion and reduce flood risks in the capital, Kinshasa. It's a city, remember, that's home to 17 million people. Here's CGTN's Chris Ochamringa with the details.
Under the project, public spaces will be developed and key roads rehabilitated across the DRC capital, Kinshasa. Neighborhoods without access to electricity and water will also benefit from the project. The funding includes a credit and grant of $250 million each. The DRC government will only have to repay the credit of $250 million. The grant is free under the World Bank's International Development Association. It's extended to the world's poorest countries to help them develop. The population in Kinshasa has grown rapidly over the past decade, but the development of its infrastructure has been slow. According to government statistics, more than 70% of the roads on the city outskirts are in need of repair. The poor state of roads has led traders transporting foodstuff from neighboring provinces to increase the cost of their products to recover the high transport charges they incur. The World Bank believes the project, dubbed Kin Elenda, will improve the lives of millions of Kinshasa residents who've been struggling to get by. Political instability and corruption have undermined the DRC government's ability to maintain its infrastructure over the past 2 decades. But the current DRC president, Felix Tshisekedi, has vowed to end insecurity and crack down on corruption. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Infrastructure development is a bit of a theme for the next 2 stories. Let's head over to Egypt now. The North African state is seeing a boom in infrastructure development. The country is making progress in building new roads in order to try and galvanize its economy, make it easier to do business and get around. But some of the construction work is causing a fair bit of unease among local residents. Here's CGTN's Nokutule Shabalala with more.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is inspecting a road construction site in Cairo. After decades of rapid population growth and congested roads, these highways and bridges are a big infrastructure push meant to develop Egypt's economy, connecting people with transport networks and basic services.
I am making this number of bridges and roads. Why? What is the purpose? It is to ease movement. Exactly.
This infrastructure boom is coming at a cost. Some residents in the Azbet al-Hagana neighborhood are becoming displaced by the new roads.
These changes worry people. We are out of work. There is no more work. The president came here for a visit and he saw Azbet al-Hagana. He said that these small alleys have to be widened so that firefighting trucks and ambulances can pass through. Well, for an alley to be widened, this means he will have to demolish more homes.
Across eastern Cairo and beyond, many long-delayed road projects are racing ahead. According to the Transport Ministry, as much as $70 billion will be spent on transport until 2024. 1/3 of that will go towards roads and bridges.
The sheer number of projects. I'm someone who is a resident of Masr El Gedida. You go to sleep and wake up to find a new project completed. You're not cut off from the area and you find a finished bridge. The speed and the skill in having the traffic movement not as obstructed as what we used to see before. The scale of roads, the scale of expansion, the sewage systems. The scale of projects seems to have multiplied 10 times compared to what was happening before President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi.
A World Bank study in 2014 estimated that congestion costs Cairo alone 3.6% of Egypt's gross domestic product. Noktula Shabalala, CGTN.
Now, businesses in Nigeria say that the cost of construction is soaring due to the rising cost of cement. Lawmakers, in fact, have criticized the dominance of 3 large firms in the country's cement sector. They say their price increases are further delaying construction that is critical to the country's economic recovery.
Nigerian lawmakers said the dominance of 3 large firms was keeping prices high and impeding construction needed to aid the recovery of the economy. Dangote Cement, founded by Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, has 60.6% market share. Lafarge Africa accounts for 21.8%, while Boa Cement has 17.6%. Their dominance stems from a cement import ban that has been in place for most of the last 20 years to develop self-sufficiency in cement production. However, the policy presented challenges over the years. Cement farms raised prices during Nigeria's 2016 recession to counter low sales volumes, and prices have continued to rise.
It has a large effect in what the price of building development will be right now in Nigeria, and it's a lot of problem because already prices are really skyrocketing, but this is due to, there's nothing the developers can do actually, but this is due to the raw materials of the likes of cement and then some other things.
And the direct impact is recorded in reduction in construction by stakeholders.
Because most people that are used to buy, like, let's say 100 bags, when they come, they will look at it and see that their money will not reach up to that 100. They will buy like 40 or 30 bags, you know. And the way market used to move before, because of the price, market don't used to move it now.
Nigeria's high prices are part of a continent-wide trend, and in some cases, sector collaborators have seen cement costs double in price in recent years.
There should be a price control, because from 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, the price is just skyrocketing without no price control, and nobody can tell the manufacturer that this price is beyond the avoidable reach of a common citizen.
The fast way will be to allow import of cement into the country. The slow way will be to invite other cement players, the bigger cement players, who are more efficient with regard to how they run their plants and so on. and who can over time bring prices down.
This is a hard-set equation of market dominance influencing prices, resulting in partially constructed apartments and buildings.
Monopoly or not, I feel that the government, they are still a very big player in regulating some of these things, and they have to come to the table and then make sure that they do what is fair by everybody, and then so that we can have a system that is balanced.
A 2016 World Bank report revealed the final cement prices in Africa are 183% higher on average than world cement prices. A great margin that could hamper Africa's agenda of self-sufficiency and competitive sector growth projections. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
It's 18:35 GMT. It's time for another break. Here's what's coming up next. The US real estate market is witnessing its largest boom in a decade. We'll have the data. And piñata makers in Mexico fighting for survival amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Their story and plenty more coming up shortly.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Right, and let's make a quick run through some stories making our headlines at this hour. Starting with a report from South Africa into excess deaths over the past year. That report suggests that more than 133,000 people in the country died from COVID-19, and that's far more than the official tally of nearly 55,000. In the latest report published on Wednesday, the SAMRAC said that South Africa had seen 157,000 excess deaths in the last 12 months, and it estimated that 85% of them were attributable to COVID-19, which implies that just over 133,000 people have died from that disease. The authorities in Tunisia have announced the easing of some pandemic restrictions from the middle of May to early June. Authorities say these new measures will pave the way for a return to normal life. The Interior Ministry has reduced the number of curfew hours as part of that move. Officials highlighted the need to adhere to health protocols in coffee shops and restaurants with a minimum capacity of 30% in closed areas and 50% in open air spaces. Tunisia's health ministry has reported more than 11,500 deaths attributable to COVID in the North African state. The DRC President Felix Tshisekedi has just concluded a visit to Ethiopia. Tshisekedi was visiting the country in his capacity as the AU chairperson. He met with the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to discuss the Grand Renaissance Dam. Mr. Tshisekedi is seeking to help Ethiopia, Sudan and Egypt to reach an amicable agreement. The DRC President had visited both Egypt and Sudan in earlier visits to discuss the issue. That's a run through your headlines. Away from the continent now, a major US fuel pipeline company has reportedly paid a cyber criminal outfit, DarkSide, nearly $5 million in ransom following a devastating cyber attack. Colonial Pipeline suffered a ransomware cyber attack on its administrative systems over the weekend, and that took down its service for 5 days, causing supplies to tighten, especially on the eastern coast of the United States. US media reported that a ransom was paid. Bloomberg was the first to break that particular story. Colonial said on Thursday that it would not comment on the issue. Now, on Friday, Japanese consumer tech giant Toshiba said its European division in France had been hit by the same cyber criminal outfit. Following the cyber attack, Colonial announced it would resume operations on Wednesday evening, but it warned that it could take several days for delivery of supplies to return to normal. The 8,900-kilometer pipeline normally carries equivalent of about 2.5 million barrels a day of fuel all the way from Texas up the East Coast. Into the world of cryptocurrencies, Dogecoin soared on Friday after a tweet from one of its supporters, Elon Musk, and as Coinbase said it would list the meme-inspired cryptocurrency. The price of Dogecoin climbed to an intraday high above 56 cents in early morning trade, according to Coinmetrics data. As of 10:30 in the morning, Dogecoin was up 39.4% at 54 cents a coin, on track for its best day since the 16th of April. Relatively speaking, though, it's still down about 20% from a record high of nearly 67 cents just a week ago. On Wednesday, the Tesla CEO also made a rather surprise announcement that his electric car firm would stop accepting Bitcoin as payment due to concerns of its environmental impact. That led to a brutal sell-off in cryptocurrencies. Dogecoin was also affected, but it's already fallen significantly after Musk's appearance on Saturday Night Live over the weekend, in which he called the digital coin, in his words, a hustle. Now, President Joe Biden's infrastructure deal is expected to affect multiple sectors across the country. But this comes as the American real estate market is seeing its largest boom in a decade. But as CGTN's Sarah Walton finds out, home buyers are increasingly facing tough competition from outside the country.
From the manicured lawns to the stars and stripes, owning a home is as American as apple pie. But more and more often, the owner of this little slice of the American dream is actually an international company or even a foreign government. Single-family homes have been an attractive investment prospect for such buyers since the 2008 financial crisis, and they've become even more popular during the coronavirus pandemic.
As a result of social distancing, people needing to work from home, or you had some pent-up demand of urban renters who for a long time now have possibly been in the process of considering moves to suburbs. So in many ways, the pandemic catalyzed things that were already in process in a large way, and that's led to strong occupancy, strong rental growth.
Foreign speculators now account for nearly a third of the investment in single-family rental homes. Earlier this year, German insurer Allianz said it was buying more than $4 billion worth of houses in the US, and Canada's Public Sector Pension Investment Board is buying around 2,000 American homes. That's making life harder for individual buyers, now competing with large institutions that are seen as a much safer option.
Usually they can close faster because they can buy it all cash versus, if a normal home buyer comes in, they have a bank, it's going to take them 30 to 60 days to close. That might drag out versus, you have an international conglomerate, they have 100,000, 200,000 to close in your house very fast.
The home ownership rate in the US last year was just under 66%, down from a high of 69% in 2004. And that ownership has a knock-on effect. A home is often someone's biggest investment and most common way of building generational wealth. But housing market experts say it's important to keep the scale of the issue in context.
While there is a lot of news circulating recently of foreign governments, foreign pensions, even domestic investors acquiring these single-family rental homes, a huge, vast 95% greater majority of all single-family rental homes in the United States are actually owned by folks who own less than 10.
Analysts say it would be difficult to legislate against foreign investors without penalising US rental property owners. And instead, the focus should be on building affordable housing to help more Americans onto the property ladder. Sarah Walton, CGTN, New York.
India's COVID-19 tally has passed a grim milestone, over 24 million, with over 343,000 new cases being registered. The country has reported a third straight day of 4,000 deaths or more. The capital, Delhi, will remain at lockdown until Monday, as it has begun the second round of immunizations. Abdullah Hashmi has this report.
Delhi's Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal says the Indian capital plans to vaccinate its entire population of 30 million against COVID-19 free of charge at more than 380 centers in the next 3 months. But this comes as the country's two largest vaccine manufacturers, Bharat Biotech and Serum Institute of India, struggle to meet the growing demands, with many providers running out of stock.
There is no such center in my area from where I can get vaccinated. People are so much off to it that they want to get vaccinated, but slots are not available.
Besides the issue of booking vaccination slots, many people also have to bear the weight of soaring vaccine prices. The cost of Serum Institute's Covishield has more than tripled since January, from 250 rupees per dose, a little over $3 to up to 900 rupees or around $12 per dose.
The charges for one dose, which is 900 rupees, that seems to be on a higher side, because just few days back, I think maybe in the month of April, same BL Kapoor hospital was charging 250 rupees, right, for one dose. So it doesn't look justified. How come that 250 rupees for same Covishield one dose has been increased to 900 rupees per dose? That is, of course, not at all justified.
Despite the price hikes, health workers and officials are still urging members of the public to get vaccinated as soon as they can.
If people will get vaccinated as much as possible in a single day, it will be helpful for each of us, for frontline workers, for people and general population of India. Okay. So I urge people that get vaccinated as soon as possible. There are so many myths regarding vaccination. Don't trust them, don't listen to anyone. As your doctor advises you, just follow them, go and take the vaccine. It will be helpful for you only.
The Delhi government has asked for a boost in supply of vaccines from the local manufacturers, and it's saying they're doing everything which they can to procure the vaccines. Meanwhile, they've also approached Reddy Labs to procure the Russian vaccine Sputnik V-Jab. Despite shortage of vaccines, vaccinations in Delhi continue for 18 and above. Abdullah Hashmi, CGTN, Delhi.
Germany's vaccination campaign continues on track. For 2 straight days this week, the country's inoculated over 1 million people a day. That places them pretty much at the top of the European scorecard for daily COVID-19 jabs. Here's Ryan Thompson with the latest.
Germany's vaccination campaign is no longer waiting for a green light. Inoculations are speeding up across the country, and vaccination centers like this one are finally bustling. So far, 1/3 of the population has had at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, and in just a few weeks' time, everyone 18 and older will become eligible.
Since the start of April, Germany has shifted gears in the pace of its vaccine rollout, breaking European records for the number of jabs given in a single day. Wednesdays like today have the most momentum, where they're giving over 1 million shots between vaccination centers like this one and general practitioners' offices.
GPs account for most of the vaccinations Monday to Friday, and since they were brought on board to help in April, the number of inoculations has more than doubled. Vaccination centers primarily give out temperature-sensitive jabs like those from Pfizer and Moderna, and they're now receiving weekly deliveries in the millions.
We could vaccinate even more people, but the vaccine is still not fully there. As soon as it is available in the appropriate quantities, we can run at full capacity here.
Some feared that vaccine hesitancy would prevail in Germany, but it's become more common to see people waiting for leftover shots or presenting fake documents to jump ahead. Under federal law, fully vaccinated people are now exempt from quarantines, curfews, and regular testing, and authorities plan to digitize paper vaccine certificates soon.
The so-called digital green certificate is of the utmost importance. This is not only important for countries depending on tourism, this is not just important for a few, it's important for all of us.
Germany has thrown its support behind the EU's so-called green certificate, but millions more will be vaccinated before Berlin can hand it out alongside every jab. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Wiesbaden.
Still on the business of vaccines, a symposium on the development and applications of vaccines developed in China has been held in the financial hub of Shanghai. This event focused on the response to concerns about the production, supply and the uptake of COVID-19 vaccines. It also follows the World Health Organization's approval of a jab developed by Sinopharm for emergency use.
the UAE has more than 70% of their peoples are vaccinated, which makes the UAE the second most vaccinated country in the world. This speed attests to the success of our joint initiative with China and the importance of solidarity during hard times.
So far, Sinopharm's COVID-19 vaccine has been approved for emergency use in 80 countries and regions. More than 100 nations and international organizations have put forward procurement requirements. The overall supply has exceeded 200 million doses in 196 countries. It's the world's most widely used COVID-19 vaccine due to its efficacy and safety.
When it comes to business during the pandemic, some of the hardest hit parts of virtually any economy are those tied to travel and entertainment. So weddings, parties, social events, they've been decimated pretty much wherever you look. In Mexico City, society starts to return to a semblance of normality. There's one particular business that's also fighting to keep long-held traditions alive. Alistair Baverstock explains.
The Mexican piñata, a papier-mâché creation filled with candy and beaten by blindfolded kids to claim the goodies locked inside. It's a Mexican party tradition going back centuries. No children's party here is complete without one, yet the global pandemic is changing this tradition, as Claudia Torres, out shopping for her son's 4th birthday, knows only too well.
Es como el clímax de la fiesta.
The piñata is the climax of the whole party, but we have to do it differently now. His birthday was in April, but we can only celebrate it now that his grandparents are vaccinated in an open-air park and with very limited people.
Indeed, at Piñatas Mena, one of Mexico City's longest-standing specialty shops, the demand has changed.
Regularmente bajas.
Sales are very low. Children's parties were big events before, requiring 2 or 3 piñatas. But now our clients need just one little piece for an event to which only 5 kids are invited.
Porque puede ser de 5 niños la fiesta nada más.
Back at the workshop, Hugo Mena runs the operation. It has been a rough few years. He was displaced by the massive 2017 earthquake, and now getting through the pandemic is about changing the business model. But with hopes that Mexico City may soon downgrade its pandemic protocols to yellow, the third of 4 tiers on its national virus map, Hugo sees encouraging signs for better days ahead.
En este último mes hubo un poco más de movimiento.
There has been a little more business over the past month, and it seems like the authorities may soon permit party venues to reopen. So we hope that happens, so that we too can benefit.
Hugo's family has been making piñatas since his great-grandfather first started the business a century ago, and if there's one thing they know they can count on, it's Mexican fiesta culture.
We are betting that things will get back to normal. Mexicans are joyful people and they love parties, so we hope we'll start seeing parties again like there were before.
Alistair Baverstock, CGTN, Mexico City.
A quick run through commodity prices. We normally do track coffee prices in New York, but today I'm going to focus on coffee from Kenya. Kenyan coffee has been attracting much better prices in the first 2 months of 2021 at the auctions that are usually held here in Nairobi. The average price per kilo last year was about $4.25, despite the interruptions caused by the pandemic. That was 49% higher than average prices in 2019. The 2021 price per kilo, though, even better, $6.20, roughly 46% more than 2020's average. And coffee volumes last year also did fall, though, by over a quarter compared to 2019. Here's what's coming up next. Still to come, we'll show you how a community project in South Africa is helping to feed people amid rising hunger due to the pandemic.
Don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to the program. Food security is a growing challenge in South Africa. In fact, it's become a lot worse since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. With so many people going hungry, the Seed community launched the Ubuntu project to assist. Here's Sumitra Naidu with that story on Grassroots tonight.
The Zulu word Ubuntu means I am because you are, and it's never been so important than in the last year. COVID devastated the economy, the hard lockdown saw hundreds of businesses close down and bigger companies scale back on staff. So many are still hungry today. The Ubuntu project is helping families develop their own veggie gardens to feed themselves.
People depend on the government to actually get food, so we started out giving out seedlings, veggies. It then came to a point where we had to now take out of our own pockets to actually give out to the community, to informal settlements. I mean, COVID did disrupt each and everything. It disrupted big companies, it disrupted small companies. So that's why people lost their jobs. We came up with a plan so that people could eat.
The Ubuntu project also delivers to those that can afford a box of fresh produce. Customers are loving the convenience of having farm-fresh veggies brought to their homes.
The farmers had a lot of produce on their fields that they farmed before COVID, and when COVID hit, they had a lot of produce on their hands and they didn't know how to get rid of it. At Ramah, they raised funds to go buy the produce from the farmers, and that produce would be put in a form of a box to be handed out to the communities. So farmers are getting some form of income to support their families, and the communities are getting some food to eat during the time of COVID.
The Ubuntu box has become so popular, it's now a campaign to promote farming. Each time a box is purchased, you agree to donate a farmer's kit to a community. Each kit is made up of 30 seedlings and 10 kg of compost to get them started. It's also encouraging to see young people running the project.
As the youth, we're always complaining that we are left out, or we don't take part in certain things, or the government or people don't involve us in certain things that are happening around the country. So for us, it's just more of a, how could we help? We saw this and then it was more like, how could we help? Where could we fill the gap? We just thought maybe we should take part and just put ourselves in it and take up space in that particular thing and just own up to it and bring a difference into people's lives.
The Ubuntu project is more than putting food on the table. It touches the core of human dignity and enables people to become producers within their own communities. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
All right, then a quick run through the currencies as we wrap up the program. One thing to look forward to next week, the central bank in Africa's second largest copper producer, Zambia, will be holding its rate-setting meeting. The announcement of the MPC decision coming on the 19th of May. Now, the policy rate there is still 8.5%. Country's currency is down by at least 22.5% in the last 12 months. That includes a 6% decline so far in 2021. Copper prices have rallied to record levels that we haven't seen since 2011, but that isn't translating it into making it easier for the continent's first pandemic-era defaulter to service its debt arrears. We'll keep an eye on that story for you and update you next week. For now, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen here in the last hour. Many ways to get your feedback back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today's up next from Washington, D.C.